Hi, and welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. My name is Trisha Friedman. You have caught us smack in the middle of our media and information literacy mini-series. If you didn't check out the episode just before this one, I'd encourage you to do so. On today, we have a very special guest, Erin Olsen, who is the Senior Manager of Education Partnerships at the News Literacy Project. We're going to get into all of the amazing free resources that the News Literacy Project provides to educators and ways that you can continue to learn with Erin and her team throughout this episode. Erin is also a former educator herself. She's taught language arts, she's taught high school English, and her interest in meaningful technology integration led her to a position as a technology integrationist for a regional state education agency. Erin supports districts with tech, with literacy, with project-based learning, and STEM. She has since returned to her home district to serve as an instructional leader and instructional coach. She holds 2 degrees, a bachelor's in English and a master's degree in instructional and curriculum effective teaching. It's such a joy to have a member of the News Literacy Project here with us today to continue the important conversations about media and information literacy. Before Erin joins us for this great conversation, a quick word from our amazing mini-series show sponsor.
Hey listeners, if you're looking for top-notch trusted information sources, we've got a special shout out for you. Mackin isn't just any platform, they're a gateway to a world of quality, vetted information. They've teamed up with some of the best in the biz, from Dogo News and Reference Point to Adfonte Media, and we're even introducing their new partner, Press Reader. With so many incredible sources under one roof, Mackin ensures that you get only the best. Ready to dive in? Simply head over to mackin.com/digital/databases and discover all of the incredible resources Mackin has lined up for you. Trust me, it's a game changer. Thank you again to Mackin for being a continued sponsor with the Shifting Schools community.
And with that, here is Erin Olsen, the second of our third episode in our information and media literacy mini-series. Welcome to the show, Erin Olsen. Welcome to the show, Erin. We're going to talk about your current role in a little bit, but I'd love to actually start by hitting the rewind button. You are a former middle and high school teacher, and I'm wondering if we can start there, maybe with you sharing an anecdote with listeners about how your experience as an educator helped you understand that news literacy does have a place in every classroom.
Well, like you mentioned, I was a middle school and high school English teacher, and I was teaching the time when schools in Iowa were all going one-to-one. And, with access to technology, there comes a responsibility. And so I made sure to help my students understand where we could get accurate information from, the various places, whether we were using tools to find newspapers from across the world so we could understand perspective and where your place in the world influences that perspective, to just getting better at searching. Some of those basic digital and media literacy skills that were needed because, again, we had access. But, I think initially where that fell short would be news literacy. And so I think back to the skills that I was teaching, and it does connect to news literacy, but specifically, I think we need to think about those critical thinking skills, understanding and analyzing credibility, accuracy of information, and ultimately that a free press leads to a better democracy, that those skills transcend classrooms. It wasn't, just the space of the reading teacher to teach reading. We read in all classrooms. It's not just in the computer science classroom where we discuss things related to computers. Every classroom accesses technology. And so, we think about these skills, they're necessary for our students to interact with information related to our various subjects. And also, we are all affected by mis and disinformation, unfortunately, whether that's in history or health or insert profession. Mis and disinformation, it does not leave anyone out. And so, again, just as there was a responsibility in my classroom because we had access, I now see the responsibility to include news literacy because our students are bombarded with information in all their feeds, and that information affects their learning in all of our classrooms.
It's music to my ears. And at the same time, I could very much imagine a listener thinking, gosh, what Erin's saying is true. Like there is, because we have information overload almost, there's also access to mis and disinformation all the time. But I know that the work that you do with the News Literacy Project says, hey, don't get overwhelmed. Don't, give up hope. There are things that we can do, systems, and think about this strategically. And I'm wondering if you want to talk about that, because I think that's really important, actually, that we don't say, oh, well, I guess we can't trust anything. And I do hear folks saying that sometime, and I'm thinking, no, that's definitely not the attitude that we want to take. So can you give us some advice in terms of thinking systems, thinking strategy? What do we do to make sure that we are cultivating news literacy in that way?
So what you mentioned about not trusting anything, that I think that's even more scary. The inability, our fear of trusting anything, that is worse. And so I would say that we got to get curious. Let's get curious. Let's foster a healthy skepticism about the information we encounter. And it is not hopeless. That, in fact, we are empowered. We're empowered through education. The strategies that we can utilize to navigate the flood of mis and disinformation are actually pretty simple. We only complicate it, and we don't have to. For example, one of my favorite strategies is lateral reading. And I'm sure that's rooted in, my teaching background. But as an English teacher, I taught students to read deeply, to dig into the text, to analyze phrases, okay? But lateral reading is simple. You come across information and it, triggers something, open up another tab and see if you can find it confirmed somewhere else. That's lateral reading. It's that simple. Trying to find it across the internet to see if other reputable sources have reported on said information. And if not, well, let's put it into question. And if so, okay, well, then we've confirmed what we were curious about and we're able to move on. I think too about those strategies, something that I know that I'm working on putting into practice, but also I think this makes me a better person. And that is checking our emotions. I'm a 90s kid, so check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? Like you come across something that angers you, that's a sign. Pause. There's power in the pause. We take steam out of mis and disinformation when we stop sharing it. It's pretty simple. So we are the ones that control the power. We just have to remind ourselves of that and then execute those strategies. So we do stop the spread, and then we take ownership that just using some of those skills can go a long way.
And that's really powerful, because I think there's an interesting activity to do even with, a news feed in social media where you are only presented with the headline, and more frequently now it's sort of, headlines that are trying to trigger a very intense emotional response so that you click, because again, that metric is so important for them to get the clicks. And just looking at those headlines, inviting students to question, what are they trying to hook you with? And is it outrage? Is it fear? Is it anger? Again, I think it's really important, as you said, like for students to be able to name it and identify it so that we're not currently, we're not constantly getting trapped in that sort of doom scrolling model, which I think isn't good for any of our mental health. So that's really important. And
yes,
Erin, I'm thinking, right now, of course, these skills, I think, are going to be more important than ever before, because we're living and learning in an era of AI. And I know that News Literacy Project is also working to get out in front of this, and is doing work around that, and also understands like what AI is going to mean for our media landscape, so to speak. So can you talk a little bit about what you see as an opportunity for us to leverage news literacy, given that AI, I think, is going to have a huge impact in terms of the way in which we search or consume information? Would you like to talk a little bit about what's going on over at the News Literacy Project?
Yes. So I would say the News Literacy Project is, we're responsive to the needs of educators and the public, but we're also proactive in planning and creating resources to help support this learning. And of course, AI is a hot button topic. And we think about AI's now involvement in our digital landscape where, it can produce mis and disinformation at a dizzying pace. Even attempting to predict what the future of AI will be, it's, your guess is as good as mine. But we know that it does have influence and we know it will affect. And so let's come back to, again, the simple answer: education. That is how we navigate AI. It is with those strategies that I spoke of earlier, thinking through the information that comes our way. And of course, you mentioned, content that's produced and not knowing what's what. And we do need to teach students how to differentiate between information that comes into their landscape. So what is it? Is it straight news? Is it hard news? Is it opinion journalism? Because not everything is news, right? And so we have to consider, what is this source? What's the purpose of the source? And then we use those strategies to be able to detect if it's accurate or not, if it's mis or disinformation. Is it AI generated? And that can be scary when we think about the possibilities with AI. I know that, another one of our strategies is critical observation that we can use in helping detect mis and disinformation. And really that's just this intense look at whatever, the content is, the image. And that might work for a while with AI, but I'm going to say only a short time. Like, that's not enough. Recently I had an AI image of myself created and I had 3 hands. Well, I imagine if I ran it through that same AI generator, I'm going to have the 2 hands that I, possess. That AI gets better, right? We know AI improves. That's by nature. And so we need to use those lateral reading strategies, reverse image search. That's another great strategy that we can use. So we do have resources to help educators and public alike navigate the world of AI. In thinking on that, by the way, of a classroom, I recently just read an opinion piece written by a high school senior, and it was about calling for more AI in the classroom, how it helped this student become a better student. And I thought that interesting, and it made me think about, back to when we were integrating technology initially, and acceptable use policies were all over with a do not mindset. Do not go here. Do not do this. And then, just as I wanted then, as I want now, I want technology to make us better people, better researchers, better writers. But I think we have to be cautious and curious with the how, because AI is going to get better, and it has the potential to help support us in that quest for better, but it also has the potential to maximize its ability to fabricate, plagiarize. And so again, the answer is education. And that's how we get better. That's how we use it better. That's how we are better, through our intentional use of strategies to discern. And again, that is empowering.
Yeah, for me, that key word there is intentional. We at Shifting Schools, we have been working a lot with schools around this piece of how do you help students leverage it for lots of different accessibility needs, how, the equity piece, private tutoring has long been only within the grasp of, folks that have the wealth to afford it. There's a lot that can be done with AI now that is going to give more students access to that kind of tutoring. And yet we never want to position this as a replacement for human connection, right? And I think the bias piece is such a great conversation to have. One of the exercises I love doing, is inviting ChatGPT to revise something in the voice of, and then age of students you're working with. What assumptions is it actually making about your age? What's it getting right? What's it getting wrong? Because often that activity leads them to commenting on how, no, it's not getting this right. And I think in this conversation about all of the opportunities, I think it's so important that we're never suggesting to students that technology is more creative than you. It is not. Right. But thinking about where can it assist, it is a really great frame. And I think too, that kind of connects with my next question around, I'm seeing a lot of interesting news organizations. The New York Times just recently posted they're hiring for like an AI specific position. Outlets like Wired are very transparent in terms of where and when they employ AI in generating stories, and when and where they do not. There's a bunch of different like real estate magazines that use it. I've noticed with like sports journalism, it seems increasingly popular because I could see how like with the stats and analyzing certain data, like, yes, that would be, if you're kind of just doing the rundown of a game, that might work. But there's going to be plenty of situations where I don't want certain stories to be reported on solely by AI. And this is another great opportunity for us to help students understand what is the art and craft of journalism? And we've been really fortunate on this show we've had graphics reporters, we've had data journalists. We recently had Jen Christensen, who's at Scientific American, talking about the importance of science communication, especially in light of the pandemic. And we've approached those conversations from, what are the skills that today's modern journalist needs to have and how have they cultivated them? And I think it's so important that we continue to step back. And if, as you and I were saying earlier, we don't want a society that is, completely saying, well, I cannot trust any of the media. I think part of it is understanding, like, how does a journalist work? How do they function? Because of course there is strategy and process involved. And I'm wondering, if you can talk a little bit about how the News Literacy Project is also helping to kind of demystify what the art and craft of journalism is all about.
Well, part of news literacy is understanding the standards of journalism. Just as a former educator, I had standards to adhere to. I mean, all professions do. Journalists do as well. Thinking about fair reporting, having resources and researched and relevant. And so I think it's important that as we're teaching news literacy, that we ensure that we help students understand that journalists have standards of journalism that they adhere to, and they are far different than the influencer who is just posting on their TikTok. It's different. And that comes at understanding, the zones of information, who is posting what for what purpose. And even with that, I would say humanizing journalists, that their work is so important. It is vital. The free press is vital to our democracy, and honoring that by taking time to understand that process of creation, just as you spoke to, I think is important. And even as part of, the News Literacy Project, we have a program called Checkology. It's a free online database of lessons. And there's a newsroom to classroom program as part of that, where there's journalists from across the country who are willing to zoom into classrooms or come in person if location allows to share their areas of expertise. And I would encourage educators to take advantage of that because, once we understand the profession, we understand the process and creation, and we also get to meet the people, I think we have a different level of understanding and empathy and connection than we would have had we not had those experiences.
That's great. What you said about humanizing the profession, I think like a great way to do that also invite a local journalist into your class or have a virtual meeting with them. We're also in an era where local journalism is being really, really underfunded. And I think getting somebody as local to your community as possible to come in and talk about, as you said, their standards and why they want to get their reporting for your community right and what that means to them. That's great advice. Something I really appreciate about the News Literacy Project is that it's not just educator facing, but you very much are realizing news literacy is, we have a gap for, folks that are not students on campus, but are connected to them, their parents and caretakers, their grandparents. Can you talk more about why a community-centric approach is one that seems so very important to the work that your organization is doing?
Mis and disinformation affects us all. So, of course, community needs to be involved in our quest to leverage the power of community to help stop the spread of mis and disinformation. It's so important. And of course, as you heard me mention, it's vital to our democracy. So our campaigns include partnering with community organizations and organizing learning geared towards different groups to help support their learning. And much as the seatbelt campaign or, do not litter campaigns, very similar in nature, as we want to leverage and connect with community to help be part of the solution, because it does take us all. And one of the things that we offer that I appreciate for community is Rumor Guard. Educators like that too, but it is geared towards community. And Rumor Guard will bring up a viral rumor, and then it takes it through 5 factors of determining whether it's legitimate, if it's accurate. And I appreciate this as a learning tool, not only as just interesting, but as a learning tool, because each rumor goes through those same factors, or the factors that apply to said rumor. And so that repetition, I think, helps embed questions we should be asking ourselves when we come across a rumor, a viral rumor at that. Interestingly enough, the last one that was just featured was, it brought up the image of a robot playing pickleball. Mm-hmm. And that is a rumor. Like, that was not real. It was doctored, manipulated, manipulated image. And so I sincerely appreciate that as one of our many resources for community.
Yeah, I think it's so important because, videos like that go viral so quickly, right? Mm-hmm. And because we're in such an information or misinformation rich ecosystem, I think almost what you're suggesting is get into the habit of pausing and slowing down what you are just accepting to be true, right? That is so important. Mm-hmm. And again, I think in this era of AI, that's where, as you were saying, it's great to make sure that students understand what it's capable of creating. I used to teach a course with students where they were learning WordPress and Divi, and were making really sophisticated making websites. And part of that was for them to understand, do you see how easy it is to make something that looks really legitimate, and to do it with not really expensive software, and to consider what this means when we have tools that can produce this. And I feel like it's really difficult to understand it unless you have experienced the tools firsthand. And then it's, now I really see the power that this has. So, Erin, I'm guessing once folks head over to the website, and again, you've mentioned Rumor Guard, these are all accessible from the News Literacy Project website. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. For folks who are listening and they're saying, okay, Erin, I hear you. I am feeling the sense of urgency to make sure that we're doing a better job with news literacy. Do you have a few suggestions for actionable steps folks can take to, if they're thinking, I want to make this a priority, not months from now, but sooner than that, I'd like to bring this into my classroom. What are a few suggestions that they can consider taking on?
Well, first of all, we have Checkology that I mentioned earlier is our online platform for free lessons. I would encourage educators to use that in support of teaching news literacy. But if we're just going to go to basics and think about strategy, what can I use as when I get done with this podcast? What could I, what awareness can I, heighten, and can I sharpen my discernment skills? I would speak to thinking about misinformation, red flags, and patterns. So misinformation can come in a variety of ways, but there are things that we can watch out for, sharpen our defenses. Some of those things are when you see t-shirts or posters, pictures of t-shirts or posters with text on them, chances are that text was manipulated. When you see nature photos that are too good to be true, they probably are too good to be true, and it's clickbait. When you see posts that accompany taglines like "make this go viral," or "the mainstream media doesn't want you to report this," or "doesn't want you to share this," those alarmist kind of statements, that's another flag. So if we can build our awareness of those flags and those, the shapes that misinformation takes, I think that helps build our defense. And then we can also go on the offense when we're in our feed and as we're navigating all that comes our way. So I think that, those things are helpful. Of course, I mentioned lateral reading, which is so simple. In fact, even, Google Bards thinks so. So that AI recently, I just read, now includes when you use Bard and get a search query back, with, search of information, it will have, you have to click a G or something, but it'll have highlighted in green information that can be found across the internet. There's our lateral read. And then in brown, information that can't. Of course, I would rely on my lateral reading skills above all else, but I think that's another strategy that can be used right away. And then lastly, be emotionally aware of what triggers you. I mean, mis and disinformation loves to manipulate us, and that can easily be done through our emotions. We are an emotional people, and we're angry, we want to do something, and that one can get us every time. We don't think clearly or rationally when we're when we are angered. So we just got to use that power in the pause.
I love that. I think if I could add one thing to that, News Literacy Project also has a great podcast out called "Is That a Fact?" Yes. If you're listening to this podcast and you probably like podcasts, I'd highly recommend checking that one out. You had a recent episode about the social media influencer, which we're teaching young folks. They are, again, like surrounded by that as a culture. And a really great episode, too, on mis and disinformation in the wellness and health industry, which I was recently reading. The size and scope of that industry is like much, much larger than I realized, like incredibly big. And I think, again, a lot of motivation to have mis and disinformation in regards to, like, take this supplement and you will look this way, or take that supplement and you won't get this virus, or, and I think it's really important to be having that conversation about, again, as you said at the very beginning, misinformation connects to all, all aspects of society. So we need to be helping students practice that critical analysis, that critical review in various different fields, and not just saying, oh, well, this is, the language art teacher, it's their job, leave it over there. So again, I don't know if there's another episode of that podcast that you would point folks to, but it's a great program. Highly recommend it. And we'll link to that in the show notes as well.
Wonderful. No, I think that's really important. And I'm glad you brought up the health one. It is frightening how much mis and disinformation has entered that field. And I think that, that touches on and it speaks to the importance of, making sure that we are news literate. And our students are hearing from, the influencers that are sharing that information, that are paid to share that information. And so speaks to the importance of critical thinking.
Yes,
that is for sure.
It very much does. Erin, thank you so much for your time today. Listeners, you'll be able to learn all about what Erin pointed us to. Again, the News Literacy Project is it's like a treasure trove of resources and inspiration to make sure that we're embedding news literacy, not for a day or a week, but throughout the year, because it's an ongoing conversation we very much need. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.